Welcome to the Got Any Cows podcast. If you want to learn all you can about the beef cattle industry, this is the podcast for you. My name is Seth Christensen. My company has sent beef cattle genetics to 45 of the 50 states and 12 countries around the world. I've had the chance to learn from some of the best and brightest in the beef cattle industry, and I invite you to join me for those conversations here on the Got Any Cows podcast. Hey guys, this is Seth Christensen with the Got Any Cows podcast, and I wanted to invite you personally to put a mark on your calendar. So August 27th of 2025, I want to circle on it, and I want you to mark in there, put in CGX auction. Christensen Genetics auction is happening August 27th. Make sure that you're subscribed. Go to gotanycows.com. At the bottom of that landing page, you'll see a subscribe section there where you can fill out and subscribe to our website. That will put you on our mailing list. The second that catalog opens, it'll show you everything that's available to bid on in the August 27th auction. You'll get an email with VIP access. What does that mean? That means you get the first bids. Only one person can be in at any given value. If you want to bid on any given auction, only one person can have one bid. You can't have two people in at the same money. If you want the best prices, you need the earliest access. And that's what I'm offering to you as our podcast listeners here on the Got Any Cows podcast, is to subscribe on the Got Any Cows website. We can give you the auction link before anyone else has it so that you can get on the auction, place your bids first, see what's available first, know what you're gonna buy on that August 27th closing date, and you can get the best prices as you place your bids. Every auction, there are some things that sell at or near the opening bid. There are great buys to be had every time. That's the fun of an auction. Some of these things are gonna go way higher than we expected. Some of these things are gonna go way cheaper than I'd let them go private treaty, but that's what makes this fun. There is value there for you as our podcast listeners if you go to gotanycows.com, subscribe to the mailing list, get that VIP access, and hop on and bid early. And then make sure again that on your calendar you have that August 27th date marked in. That auction is going to close at 6 p.m. Mountain Time, and it's going to close horse race style finish. So depending on the auction, some close right there close to 6 p.m. Quite often they'll go out towards 7 or 8 p.m. as they close. Every time any lot in the auction has a bid, the entire auction will extend by an additional 5 minutes. And so there's always a lot of activity right at closing. So make sure you're there, make sure you're present, make sure you're watching. Don't miss out on those great buys that there are to be had and some of the neat initial offerings that'll be present in the auction August 27th. With Christensen Genetics. Be sure to subscribe and get your link early at gotanycows.com. Well, I'm here with Andrew Pryor from 16 Peaks Cattle Company on the Got Any Cows podcast. We're sitting at the American Akaushi Association convention in Kansas City, Missouri. And Andrew, I appreciate you taking time out of your schedule to sit with me. If you would, give us a little bit of your background and tell us kind of who you are and where you come from.
Sure, yeah, I really appreciate the opportunity. I'm from Eastern Tennessee, currently located in Sweetwater, Tennessee. We're kind of in between Knoxville and Chattanooga, about dead center there. But originally from Maryville, Tennessee, a town just about an hour north. And we had the opportunity to move there in 2020. But we had farmed since about 1843.
Oh, wow.
In that community.
How many generations deep are you then in Tennessee?
I'll be the... Let me do my math here. I'm the 5th generation that's been there. So, really, really rich history. As the generations have passed, that land has been divided up. And, my grandfather and my dad weren't able to be full-time on the farm or the ranch. And so I've had the opportunity through a couple different things. I've got a business partner there that originally got me back to have an opportunity on his place full-time. And then as we acquired the additional property, my dad's now retired, as we want to call it, but he's on the ranch full-time as well. So it's sustaining both families now and just continues to grow and grow.
That's fantastic. I love that. I say to hear of an ag enterprise period that's full-time feeding families is a huge accomplishment. You know what I mean? You back up a couple of generations, and it's a similar story in my family. You know, my grandpa was able to farm full-time, so was my great-grandpa, but my dad has always worked a job in addition to running the family farm, there in Idaho. So.
Yeah, and I think that's it's a great way to raise a family, don't get me wrong, but if you're trying to do this in the evenings and every holiday you're playing catch up, it's difficult to find any margin time to be away with your family, and everything is always, when I'm off work, I've got to be over here. Being able to get back to the ranch full time, don't get me wrong, we work a lot of hours.
Oh, yeah.
But at the same time, everything is not rushing when you get off work. You got time to dedicate to do things the right way, the way you plan to do it all along. You finally can do that and take the time to do so.
Oh, yeah. And I think, it's an opportunity for both you and for me to be able to work full time in ag at our age. I think it's a huge blessing, just a tremendous opportunity.
And never take it for granted.
Oh, yeah. And just atypical. You know what I mean? Honestly, it's difficult. It's challenging to get into ag, and especially ag full time. Sure. We'd be in the minority at this point in time. And yeah, I consider myself extraordinarily lucky, and I've been impressed by what you've been doing, and I'm excited to talk to you about how you've put it together. So you're there in Tennessee. Yep. You're running the farm, running 16 Peaks full time. Yep. What is 16 Peaks, and how did it come to be?
Yeah, great question. So the fellow that I mentioned there, that we started as a business partner together, he won 2 national championships in competition barbecue.
Wow.
Was able to have an opportunity. He purchased a large tract of land there in the county that I lived. I'd known him all my life. He used to take care of his properties and take care of his wife's flowers or whatever, get their mail when they're out of town. Yeah. So I got to know him through that as a kid, just growing up. I was in college at the time, majoring in agribusiness. He calls me up and says, "Hey, I've purchased this piece of property. I have a goal. I want to raise Wagyu beef, but I have no idea how to do it. I don't know anything about a cow." And long story short, it eventually came to fruition. We started there, tied in my family's places with it, but at the same time, that was what gave me enough of an opportunity. We were partners on the thing to start with, but it gave me enough of a land base that it is functional for me to come here full time back to working in production ag. So that was the start. We originally branded as Deer Run Cattle Company. Fun fact, I don't know if you knew that.
Yep.
We began to look as we were going to launch a beef program. What do we want to do? Like, we want this certainly to be trademarked. We want it to be something that's memorable, something that tells us that our beef is raised around the Smoky Mountains, which is the function of, the major part of our community. Yeah. So we went and branded as 16 Peaks Cattle Company. That was the original brand that we've worked together on, both seed stock as well as our beef program. But that was kind of the start there. We started on the Akaushi stuff in about 2019. Oh. So we're about 6 years in and to this point.
Yeah, fantastic. So you mentioned you were going to college at the time you first started working on it. Where were you at school, and how did you find time to kind of build it? And I guess I'd even add one more portion to that question. Did you have cattle prior to that, or did you jump into the cattle at the point you formed this partnership in college?
Great question. Yeah, so I guess about my freshman year of college, I had some ideas of wanting to raise beef a little differently that I'm sure we'll get into here in a little bit, but had black Angus cattle at the time, commercial Angus for the most part, a few registered Angus, but just sold cattle commercially. We would sell some freezer beef, but very small scale. At the time, probably 40 to 50 mama cows was about the max of what I had. We would sell probably 15 to 20 in quarters, halves, and wholes, very simple. That just didn't really have, at that time in my life, didn't have that next driving force of like, what's next? How can we make this better? And that really came later in time. I remember growing up as a kid, our facilities weren't very good. Everything was wore out. We just didn't have much to work with. And I remember looking at my dad and being like, I want no part of this. Like, I'll help you because this is what we got to do. Yeah. But like, I'm not coming back to the farm. I remember that vividly, and it rings in my mind as I have made a career in this now. But it changed my life when I stepped out of high school and began to study in agriculture of like, okay, we were having this problem and here's why. We can improve this to get this better. And like now it's it's enjoyable. I love what I do every day. It's my passion. Yep. But it took me time to find that point. But once I did, it became what I went to bed thinking about, what I get up thinking about. It drives me every single day. Yeah. Grateful for the opportunity to be in production ag. So that's a long answer to say.
No, I appreciate you saying.
I had commercial cattle, was in college when we began to discuss our ideas there with my partner. And that allowed me, I guess, a year after college graduated, he was ready to go. And I was just like, man, how do we structure this? Like, how do I have skin in the game, but you own the real estate? Sure. And how does this need to work? Yeah. So I actually worked a public job for a little over a year.
Okay.
And
Public job is in.
I actually ran basically a grain elevator. It was a grain processing facility. We roasted soybeans and cracked corn. It's used. That's actually where we get our feed from today for our operation. So small world. Enjoyed my time there. Very thankful for the opportunity, but it wasn't my passion. My passion was out in the cow pasture, right? That's what drove me. So I wanted to get back to that, and we figured out how we can structure this thing together. Him still own his real estate, but work together on the cattle. He had a lot of connections, had been in the restaurant business and lots of other businesses as well, but had a lot of hospitality connections and culinary connections that was going to open doors for a future beef program that I knew I wanted to be a part of. So we figured all that out, got to work together, then slowly transitioned my family ranch over to this as well. And next thing you know, here we are with 16 peaks that just continues to grow and to grow and to grow. And the numbers on our cattle grow, our numbers on our seed stock clients grow. But the biggest thing that's growing is certainly our beef program. It just continues to get more and more traction, especially on the wholesale. We've got an exciting venture that we'll be opening up a new processing facility here in the late fall, early spring. So really excited for the future of us.
Yeah, absolutely. Congratulations. And a huge deal. And coming back around, even just to being able to do it full time. I think it was interesting, as you talked about working with your dad and some of those frustrations or challenges, which are totally normal. It's real. It's hard to work cattle no matter how you have it set up. Sure. It's a lot harder if it's not set up right. And I think what an opportunity, because I even look at it, same type deal as working within my family farm and things and the way we were set up prior. If you're not doing it full time, you can't do some of the same things, or at least you don't have time maybe to set it up really as a business, right? Or to think through this is the way it should be done versus this is what we have time for, or this is what we have capital for, and what a neat opportunity to be able to take that on for you with Deer Run that's now 16 peaks. So in 2019, you're jumping into Akaushi Wagyu. Yep. What made you decide Akaushi? How did that come to be?
Yeah, so he had the goals after the competition barbecue. Wagyu was his thing. I honestly didn't know anything about Wagyu, so I said, let's back up here. Let's take about a year. Let's do our research. Let's go visit ranches all across the country and figure out what is our niche, where we want to be. Obviously, black Wagyu at the time was much more prominent. That's what I knew. I'd heard of at least, but I hadn't really been around it. Then I stumbled across this red Wagyu cow called Akaushi. What is this thing? The phenotype that's there, the function that's there. Man, my mind was stuck on it. I couldn't get away from it. So we immediately started going to Akaushi places all across the country and what do we need? Where is our place in this market? What do we want to do here? And I just fell in love with the cow. And more so now, I've had a lot of conversations with people like yourself today of the cattle obviously have the biggest place of how they were able to convert into muscular fat and grade prime. Sure. That's obviously the main part of the breed. Yeah. But in the way that we manage cattle, the way they have heat tolerance, their insane amount of fertility, things that you and I are able to see in our operations that are so understated of what the breed, it's so much more than prime. It's so much more than marbling. These cattle have so much to offer that is super impressive.
Yeah.
So couldn't get my mind off that to answer your question. Yeah. And went and looked at all these places. Just went back to the drawing board of okay, if we want to get in the beef business, how are we going to finish these cattle? Let's look at how other people are finishing cattle. Get all these thoughts together before we ever acquire the first cow, and let's be set up to take these cattle fully through the production process.
Love it.
So that's the next step that we took to get ready.
That's fantastic. And I think that's one of the reasons that you're doing as well as you are now. You went in with a plan, and then you've executed the plan. And I think that's one of the most, I would say the most common missing piece for people as they jump in. It's so easy to get just excited. And it is exciting. You know what I mean? The cattle are great. Like you mentioned, they make a great steak, but it's a great cow producing it. Absolutely. Instead of it being a great steak and we just have to tolerate something subpar. Sure. And so very, very exciting. But I think it's so easy for people to say, well, I'm excited, so I'm just going to go right to buying cattle. Absolutely. And the fact that you guys defined where it was you wanted to go, sure, I think is a large part of why you've been able to get there.
Yeah,
you know what
so
I mean?
Too,
you went in with a plan.
And I think too, as you make that plan, that target moves 45 times through the process, and that's okay. Yeah. My partner has a great quote and a rule. He calls it a rule he lives by, but if you aim at nothing, you hit it every single time. And that's so true. Yeah. We can have a goal and a place we're headed, and it might move. And that's okay, but we have to have a target that we're headed towards, and that's going to be the destination we'll point towards. Again, the route might change on the way there, but that's okay. But you have to have a goal and work towards it.
Right, right. No, I'd completely agree. So looking at that stage specifically, there's going to be a lot of people that are here at the convention with us that are maybe brand new to Akaushi and or brand new to cattle. Just like you would have been new to Akaushi, specifically not to cattle at that point in time. Yep. Looking at your acquisition process, when you went ahead and got them bought, I guess one, walk us through that, but two, what would you do the same or what would you do different as far as your entrance into the Akaushi breed?
Yeah, so there's a couple things that so I'll give you the story first. We ended up purchasing 69 3-in-1 pairs. We had purchased 70 and had an injury there on hauling day. So ended up with 69 3-in-1s. Those cattle came with a calf that was ready to wean and then bred back, of course. And then after they came, we confirmed those pregnancies to make sure we didn't lose anything stress-wise on the trip. And the cattle blow my mind that they were able to make that trip, move on to our native grasses fescue, which does have a fungus in it naturally that can cause a lot of issues for cattle that aren't adapted to it. Yeah. Made through all of that, didn't lose a single thing, no sickness. Man, those cattle, that's a different subject, but hardy. Yeah. That was our start. We had a lot of success out of those cattle. There wasn't hardly a single cow that was initially culled out of that group for whatever reason. Those cattle were functional and did a very good job for us. Yeah. So through that process, we actually purchased ours from Hart Brand. We went to about 5 or 6 different divisions. I don't know how many hundreds of cows we looked through. We went probably a good part of a week, 5 to 7 days. And I had pages and pages and pages of notes. And certainly want to give credit to a fellow that was working with me at the time, Logan Brown, had a great eye for cattle and was evaluating cattle with me. So he had a great eye, and we certainly keyed on his eye as well. But we took pages and pages and pages of notes, and we would take 800 to 500, 500 to 250, get that to 100, go back to the hotel, go through our notes again, go back the next day, look at the 100, and wean that down. So we could come up with a list that we liked. We would literally score the cattle on so many different categories. I'll name a few. We would look at their progeny. We would look at fertility. Are they calving every 365 days? Or were they used in ET work? We would look at pedigree and score how valuable could that pedigree become in the seed stock business. Yeah. We would look at docility. We would look at all these different factors, then basically create a composite score. Then that's how we would trim down of like, here's what our composite score is to get us down. And then revisit. What did phenotype look like? I didn't even mention that was a key part, of course. Yeah. So that's how we started there. If I had it to do all over again, I would probably trim that purchase down more and look more for doing some of that embryo work ourselves. So we obviously got into that very quickly. We probably could have shrunk that purchase a little and built that herd ourselves a little more than we did. But our goal was at the time, we knew we had a market for our beef, and we wanted to get rolling faster. We didn't want to wait to develop that herd. So I say that I would do that differently, but it did also create a faster, to get us to the marketplace. We were able to get a product on a plate faster. So there was an advantage to what we did. Probably could have addressed it a little differently, but I don't have any regrets there. It certainly worked out for us.
Yeah. So you mentioned getting product on the plate. Yep. And so, I mean, that's one of those things that honestly, I think we need more of within the breed as far as people taking things right through to selling beef. But it is challenging. And I say that, for me, for myself personally as well, I'm used to cattle. I'm used to running cattle. I'm used to selling cattle, buying them, breeding them, running them, all of that. That's all great and fine and well. But cattle are quite distinct from beef. There's a feeding process in there, a kill process, a distribution process, sales process. There's a lot that goes into turning a live animal into a finished product on the plate. So walk us through kind of your beef program, how that came to be, and maybe some of the things you learned along the way.
Yeah, so as we started, we actually marketed everything through a purveyor. So like we didn't, I say everything, very minuscule amount of beef we actually marketed ourselves. Okay. We were selling fats, and we did that strategically. Okay. Again, like you mentioned, beef and cattle, other than the fact that they come from the same animal, are two different industries. Yes. I knew nothing about the beef industry. Yeah. I don't know, I've been in cattle all my life. We were figuring things out on the Akaushi side that had a little bit of a niche to it, but for the most part, cattle are cattle. Yeah. And the beef industry was mind-blowing to me. I knew nothing. And what you think you know, try again. You don't. Yeah. Right. So as we went to bat with that, so we marketed through a purveyor, like I mentioned. I spent those close to 2 years hammering on cost. What is our cost? And I'm not talking about like when you're in avocational agriculture and doing this on the side, like, you can subsidize your farm with off-farm income and things like this is my income now. My family doesn't survive without this. So what does every time we start a tractor is a real cost. Every time I get in a truck to drive to the farm supply store is a cost. Every time I haul a calf trailer or a cattle trailer somewhere, that's a cost. Really develop a true cost. So we spent those 2 years developing that, so we truly knew as we go retail, what's the cost where I can now develop a price sheet that I can have a margin that can be sustainable. So that's what we spent that first time really doing, is really diving into that. And I think that's the most important thing you can possibly do. It still amazes me that a lot of people, even in cow-calf production ag or the beef industry, that don't know what it costs them. You know, if you're in the cow-calf, what's it cost you to produce a pound of weaning weight? What's it cost you to feed a cow for a year to develop that calf? Most people have no idea what those numbers are. Well, how do we know what we can sell our product for that's sustainable? It blows my mind, but that's that's the base of it all. So that's where we started at, was developing that, getting that together. Once we got from there, we were able to introduce that to the public, get that product out in front of people. Again, the target changes 35 times, but we were mainly retail at that point. Have certainly developed a wholesale program with certain restaurants and a little grocery that is in our area that represent our product the way we want it to be. So it's developed a lot from there, but you had to get your place started somewhere. But I felt like the key was truly determine what you have to have out of your product. You're going to be back at a public job if you don't figure that out. And that's what drove me to, we've got to absolutely nail this one on the head of what it cost us to produce a pound.
Yeah. And I think, that's a commonality for me as you tell the story of selecting your cows and the story of building out your beef program, the knowing your numbers and the attention to detail. I mean, when you went through your process of sourcing your cows, wasn't just, this one happens to be for sale, or, gate cut them, or send me a cow. You were detailed. Exactly. I mean, you focused on exactly what you wanted, and you put in the work, because it is a lot more work. You know what I mean? It'd be a lot easier to just say, hey, gate cut me a set of cows, and I'm going to sell a set of calves, right? But like you said, your livelihood's on the line, and I think that's one of the things that I feel, I guess, that I kind of bond with you, that commonality, like my bills don't get paid by any money but cow money. You know what I mean? Like there is no trust fund money, there is no other job money, there is no other business money. Like it is cow money that pays the bills. And I do think that lights a different level of fire when it's like you are running this thing like your life depends on it, because it does.
And I think too, for your and I operation both, we are trying to bank our future on, like, we're not in it for a one-time sale.
Right.
Whether it be a cattle customer or a beef customer for me in your operation in the seed stock side, I want that guy's son to buy a bull from me. Right. And that has to be, those cattle have to be profitable for him, and I have to be able to give enough value for him that he wants to come back for me. And so when your only money is coming from that, it creates that, like, it's important that guy is successful or I'm not successful. And I think those are the true operations that'll rise to the top. They're the future of our breed. They're the future of every breed. It's the people that will take care of their customer. They have a true, genuine interest in their success because they realize without their success, I have none either.
That's exactly right. It's exactly right. And, we were just at a breakout session here at the convention that you hosted on your direct to consumer beef program. And there were some questions that came in about your rotational grazing program. And I was really impressed by your attention to detail there as well, and knowing your numbers there as well. Walk us through what rotational grazing is, how you guys implement it, and the changes it has made to your operation.
Sure. Yeah. So a couple things that kind of went into that. I'll give full credit to my grandfather. He was really progressive for his time. As I first started on my own cow herd, I had a small piece of acreage there, and he was like, just cut this thing in half. Just start somewhere and let this grass rest and see what it does for you. And it completely shattered my entire ideas of focus on this is the way of the future. This grass has got to rest and see how much more tonnage you can grow with less resources. So that was a start for me. That drove me to okay, let's cut it in quarters. Okay, where's the line here of what we're doing? But I quickly realized all of these permanent cross fence things are not the way to do this. Because as I grew a herd and I got more acreage, well, now that paddock's too small for even a daily rotation, right? Right. So that was all, now all of a sudden that's in the way, take it out. That's going to help me. So in today's part of our operation, we have boundary fences in every pasture. But that's it. There's no cross fencing. On the boundary fencing, there is an electric hot wire that runs waist high around the entire farm that is ran off one charger. We're able to operate that. That charger is connected to Wi-Fi. If I'm 2 miles from the charger and I see a ground spot, I can get on my phone, turn the charger off, fix the ground and turn it back on. Yeah. There's no more traveling back, unplug, go back, nightmare. Yeah. When you're at the scale that we finally got to, embrace the technology. It's there to help you. Right. So that's where we're at today. Though that boundary wire provides a power source for me to jump temporary fencing off wherever I want in whatever shape I want. I have water basically every 300 feet. So part of the structure that I've learned to put together and work on some consulting clients with is when you're running water line, if you're putting in pipe water, again, there's places where we're using ponds or creeks or other avenues, but if I'm piping water out there, most water line is going to be 500 or less feet in a roll. Mm-hmm. So if that's the case, I have to put a coupling to put those two rolls together, right? Well, how about we put a T on it? And on the T, we can put about a $12 coupling on top that you plug a water hose in with a key to that coupling, and now we have water pressure every at least 500 feet, some cases 300 feet. Yeah. We take us a tank out there on a float valve. Now, every 500 feet, I have a water source that I can make all these different rotational paddocks. So that's kind of where it started at. Now, of course, especially in Idaho, but even in Tennessee, that doesn't work through the wintertime. Right. So we have permanent paddocks set strategically throughout there as well, but we have all these temporary spots in between those. Yeah. So water is no longer a hiccup. Right. It's shade. Yeah. So when we look at that, through the summer months, deep into July, August, and when it's extremely hot, we'll move once a day to make sure we can get to that shade. Yeah. But otherwise, like, for example, we're here in June. It's still been cool, kind of abnormally cool. Yeah. We can move those cattle twice a day and make that much more pressure on our grass on smaller paddocks. Mm-hmm. But you lend yourself to whatever the resources are. But I always tell people, if you're working a full-time job, I understand you probably don't have time to do that. Sure. Start somewhere. Okay. If your cattle are in one pasture and they never move, cut it in half. And move them every 30 days. Right, Move them once a week if you're doing more than that. Like, do something, and you will see the benefit of it and do what time allows. Yeah. And that's the place to start. So for the rotations for us, again, it moves, but the biggest key I will tell you is it doesn't stop in the growing season. We rotate cattle through the winter. We're feeding hay, yes, but we're spreading our manure. That's the most valuable resource we have. Yeah. It's the best nutrient upcycle in all of nature. A cow can consume grass that's taken up nutrients out of the soil. 99 point whatever % of it is put right back out in manure. Yep. The cow doesn't consume those nutrients. Right. But if we allow her to roam massive acres, most of that manure is going to go back out a water trough. It's going to go under a shade tree. Yep. If we stock them in an area that's small, like what we're trying to accomplish, she has to put that evenly across the landscape. So the idea is, the grass takes up the nutrients, the cow consumes it. If she's evenly placing it, it goes right back where it came from. Yeah. We haven't fertilized pasture on that farm that we're there with my business partner since 2019. Our soil sample is better than it was when we started, and we're not fertilizing anything. Yeah. So all that outside fertilizer money that we would have been putting in soil fertility is in our pocket. Yeah. But we didn't lose production, and our soil is still better. Yeah. But it's because we put it evenly across the landscape. And it's not in a pond, it's not in a tree, it's not by the water trough, it's out evenly across the grass.
Yeah. And you mentioned a couple of different numbers. Walk us through how long your grazing season is able to last relative to the average ranch in your area, and as well the water holding capacity that you've built up in the ground through increased organic matter.
Yeah, so that's a great point. Around our area, it's very typical to see early October, late September, somewhere in there is when an average rancher is going to start feeding hay, and they're going to feed hay through middle of April. So basically half the year we're dragging round bales out. And I don't know, that's just my personal thing. I work in a tractor some because I am a rancher, but that's not where I like to be. I like to be out in pasture working cattle. Yeah. So I don't want to be sitting round bales out 6 months of the year. That's just not my thing. Right. So our goal was to increase stocking density, and we have done so. But at the same time, I want to extend the grazing season even more so. That's the real thing to me. We have our native grass is fescue. Yeah. Again, we mentioned earlier that the fungus that grows in fescue can be a challenge, but cattle that are adapted to fescue, it offers one of the best advantages in grazing of anywhere else in the country with that fescue belt. That grass stays green the entire winter. You'll have a small percentage of blades will begin to turn brown, but majority of it stays green. So we can stockpile that forage. And we're grazing it. We'll graze into February, still on stockpile, and that grass is green, and we'll have more protein content than any hay that you can bale. I mean, it's very viable. So that's what makes it work. You know, in different parts of the country, you know, if you're trying to stockpile warm season grasses in the southern part of the country, you're going to lose so much nutritional value. It may or may not make sense. Where we are at, take advantage of your climate. Same for you in Idaho there, but take advantage of the assets that your land gives you. And fescue, instead of making it a curse on this fungus, find cattle that can work on it. Keep those back. Only keep progeny from those back. And utilize the grass that stays green all winter long as an advantage. So we're typically feeding hay. It just depends on the year. We've been in default drought the last 2 winters, or the last 2 falls, so we didn't stockpile as much grass. But in a normal year, we can be well into January and February before we're feeding hay. Not always the case. Again, this past year we were closer to somewhere between Thanksgiving and Christmas. That was kind of the time frame for us there, but just depends on rainfall to how we get. But you know, if we can take 6 months and feed 3 months even, but a lot of times we can be in that 30 to 60 days of feeding baled forage. Massive change. And in any beef cow operation, that first line item, highest in your budget's always going to be winter feed cost.
Yes.
Well, how can I cut that back? I want to address that first. So that's been a big passion of mine of getting to that. And going on to the organic matter question, a lot of our farm was somewhere between 1/4 and 1/2% on organic matter when we started. So a big portion of it is, if you're going to stockpile grass through the fall like we do, you cannot stock your cattle according to what grass you have in the spring and early summer, like where we are at this time of the year. If you would go to my place now, our cattle are in belly deep grass, and I'm not exaggerating. And you would think, why does this guy not, keep more females back and hold more back? Well, the answer is, I want to extend the grazing season. And so what we do is we make long, narrow, temporary paddocks. We don't want the cattle to consume all of that grass. That's not the goal. We want them to consume about 1/3. We want them to leave about 1/3, and we want them to trample 1/3. What I mean by that is, when we make long, narrow paddocks, we want it to look like basically a cold-a-mulcher, whatever you want to call it, like roll it steam flat. So what that does is, just like if you clipped it with a bush hog, it's going to reset it back to vegetative state, but it's going to lay it flat along the ground, which will insulate the ground. It keeps your soil temperature cooler, and that will eventually be consumed by your soil microbes to make organic matter. So we've seen now we're close to 5% on most of our areas across our ranch. So anywhere between 4 and 5%, depending on where you're sampling, is where we're seeing organic matter. So going from 0.5% to above 4%, there's some statistics on that I can't quote right off the bat, but, we can hold basically a 4.5 to 5 inch rainfall event in any one given 24-hour period and retain it in our soil. Whereas at 0.5%, we could barely hold an inch. So you put that on hundreds of acres, that's millions and millions of gallons of water. And then once it's in our soil, because it's insulated from the sun, we can hold it longer, and we're more drought resilient. When we were in those D4 droughts, there were people that were feeding hay in July, August, like never stopped from the middle of the growing season all the way through. And we didn't have to do that. We were closer to somewhere between Thanksgiving and Christmas on the 2 different divisions. But I didn't want to be feeding hay that early, don't get me wrong. But when you're looking around at people feeding in July, you feel awfully blessed to be feeding in November and December. But we were only able to do that because we insulated our ground. We kept our soil cool. What rain we did get, we held every single drop of it and hold on to it like it's gold, because it is.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's huge. Like you mentioned, I think knowing the costs, I think is something that I would say, maybe a trademark of you or of how you go about things, whether it's in your grazing or whether it's in your beef program or in your genetic selection. But like you mentioned, the number one cost by far and away is hay. Plain and simple. It is. It is the number one cost by far and away. Even for me, spending a silly amount of money on embryo transfer, it still costs more to feed them.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, it's for everybody. When you look at I want to budget and look at things, because, again, if it doesn't make sense financially, I'm not going to be able to stay on the ranch full time. So I tack the budget head on, and when number one light item on your budget is significantly higher than line item number 2.
Yeah.
How do we fix it? But at the same time, it can't come at performance.
Right,
It's got to come.
yes.
If it were sacrificing performance, then leave it alone.
Yeah,
But if we can do the same job and eliminate a lot of that cost, let's figure that out.
Yeah.
And I don't take anything for the status quo. It's kind of, I guess, my mantra. I don't care that everybody else in the county is doing this, and they're making fun of me because I got poly braid.
They'll call you crazy. They'll call you crazy.
I'm the guy with poly braid and step-ins that everybody thinks is a fool. But that's okay. That's fine. I'm not going to take anything for status quo. I'm going to figure out how can we be better every day and better today than we were yesterday. That's the key to it all.
Yeah, absolutely. So jumping kind of to the opposite end of the production cycle, we were talking about that gap between live cattle and finished product, beef to sell and live animals on the hoof. Sure. Walk us through your feeding protocol. How is it that you're taking animals from being a weanling or whatever? I would say all the way from that point, from the point in time that you separate a calf from its mother to the point in time that you are delivering a steak to a client. I mean, there's a series of processes between point A and point B. Walk us through kind of what that looks like at 16 Peaks, if you would.
Yeah, absolutely. So once we wean the calf, we're going to start them on a very light developer ration, but they're going to stay on pasture and rotate just like a cow herd would. Again, obviously weaned off the cow, and we will separate by sex. Obviously, being in the seed stock business, we're developing herd bulls as well. You and I both know in Akaushi how early that puberty age can be, so we've got to separate by sex.
Yes.
So we do that. We'll rotate them daily. Sometimes, as we get into summer, it might be a 2 or 3 day rotation because of heat reasons, but we're going to continue to rotate them just like they were on their mother's side. Basically what we do is we have metal bunks that will be on 4 legs that we tie all those together and basically make a train that will allow those calves to get to that developmental grain that we're going to supplement them with on a small percentage, and we're going to increase as we go. So at that age, I don't need fat calves. I need calves that are in great condition. But I don't. If they're fat at that point, I'm in a marathon. I'm not in a sprint here. So typically we're starting on like somewhere around a 1/4 to 1/2% of their body weight in a 14% standard type commodity type feed. So a light supplementation, and they're going to get my best grass as I develop them on. But they're going to rotate through that poly wire as they get closer. Typically around that 11 to 12 months at yearling time is when they're going to head in the feedlot and make that keep cull decision on the seed stock. So until that time, they've been raised identically the same. They might be a steer versus a bull if we've already made the cull, but nonetheless, nutritionally, they're on the same plane. So that's where we're making that decision. So on the seed stock side, that's why we're doing that carcass ultrasound at that time, evaluating are we keeping the marbling cattle because that's what brings our breed, or are we missing the boat here? Because those cattle have been nutritionally the same to that point. So that's where we're at there. As they go into the feedlot ration, they're going to be on a high fiber ration, but it is going to be a TMR blended ration. So haylage is the key to the foundation of what we do there. We are not a row crop place, so anything that's coming in the form of concentrate is purchased. Even silage, for that matter, is purchased. So with that being the case, what we do with the forage has to be elite level to keep that feed cost down. Again, so we're raising cool season annuals. We need those to be truly, we'll raise 18, 19% protein, 70 plus TDN. And that really shrinks the amount of corn that you have to have in your ration. And, as you meet with a lot of feedlot guys at places like this, when you tell them the percentage of corn you have in a finisher ration, they're laughing at you like, no way you're going to achieve the prime results you need. Well, here's the photos. It's getting done. But the only way that it's done is it's an elite level of forage. Those cattle are getting so much energy out of the forage that most cattle don't. But we see advantages to that. The cattle will stay on feed. You won't have as many cattle coming off feed or getting burned up through a hot type ration because most of that energy is coming through forage. And that allows us to have consistent gains throughout the process. So as we enter that feedlot, we have what we call a developer ration that's very high fiber. Basically, all we're doing is adding the developer grain that we're already on to a haylage fermented product to get that rumen and kind of used to that fermented type TMR. So we're on that typically 45, 60 days, just getting that rumen adjusted to life in a feedlot at that point.
This is about the yearling mark.
Correct.
Where you're entering the feedlot.
So let's just say we're at yearling to make it standard. somewhere around the 14, 15 month mark, we're going to transition them to what we would call a phase 1 ration.
Okay.
So at that point, we're increasing the amount of energy, decreasing that protein in that grain back a little bit, but we're feeding more grain in general.
Yeah.
So we're still at a high fiber, comparatively speaking,
Yeah.
but increasing the energy level, bringing back the protein a little. We're wanting to grow that frame. Again, these cattle at this point should not be fat.
Right.
They should be in really good condition, and they should have feed in front of them 23 and 3/4 hours a day. Make them clean up just a little bit there before feeding again, but we want them to have everything that they can consume. From that point forward, that's the majority. That's the longest ration we're going to feed. They're going to be on that until we transition to a phase 2 ration. I'm going to want them to be on a phase 2 ration somewhere between 2 and 4 months.
Okay.
And so what that timeline looks like from transitioning from 1 to 2 is different for every calf. We want to create as much uniformity as we can, but when we're feeding F1 side by side with full bloods and percentage cattle in between, that timeline's going to look a little different.
Sure.
So typically on a F1 basis, we'll be averaging 16 to 18 months. We continue to harvest F1s at 14 months. Some cattle can do it, some cattle can't.
Yeah.
Keeping that data back of why can they do it, and let's get to the bottom of that.
Yeah.
But typically in the 16 to 18 month range. And then on the full blood side, we'll probably average somewhere between a 20 and 22 month range. So more days on feed there, but those cattle do have a higher ceiling on prime.
Yeah.
That beef does bring more to help offset some of that feed cost. And at the end of the day, it gives you a way on the seed stock business to profitably market your culls.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So age at kill on an F1 then it'd be 16 to 18 in most cases.
Yep.
Age at kill on a full blood 20 to 22. What are you seeing in the carcasses at that point in time where that is shorter, that is quicker, more aggressive than what most programs would kill at? What do you see in a finished product mix?
So on F1s currently, we've got the total database on our carcass data is a little over 1,500 data points right now. F1s we're averaging 83 to 85% depending on the group.
Prime.
Prime, correct, sorry. But we're seeing some of those are purchased cattle. Some of those cattle are cattle we've grown ourselves, but trying to track down exactly where are the trends of, okay, these cattle can do it in 14 months.
Yeah.
Where does that come from? Is it on the dam side? Is it something on the Akaushi side that maybe promotes that? And obviously you're able to track the Akaushi side a lot better on the full blood. On the full blood side, we're upwards of 97%. I don't know the exact percentage there, but we rarely ever missing prime there.
Yeah.
Most of the time when we've missed prime, it's a calf that you remember a sick event earlier in its life. Maybe the cow was a first calf heifer and didn't hold good condition. So usually there's an event that you tie back there. There's really not a full blood line that we've found that if it's given a fair chance, if something in nature didn't happen, that's not going to hit prime at that level for us. So that's an incredible point. But the full blood cattle are absolutely insane on what they're able to offer. Find me another breed that can literally eliminate the select. We have never harvested a select animal.
Yeah.
And find me a breed that can do that in the first cross, but even on the full blood side, can do it in an attractive timeline. We're not feeding these cattle 36 plus months.
Right.
We're keeping these days on feed down at a level where somebody who doesn't even row crop can feed these profitably.
Yeah, and that's huge. That's a huge deal. So looking at it with the marketing on the final end product, as far as saying, hey, we got to generate the top line revenue, before we even look at that top line as far as expenses. What does marketing look like for you guys? What are your main revenue sources, and how are you going about getting that revenue generated, making the sale? What's your point of sale, and what are you selling?
From cattle and beef.
Yeah, from cattle and beef. If you look at the end of the year, and I know you'd mentioned you're split across multiple entities, you guys are smarter than me and building a little additional liability protection in there. But if you're looking at your number one sources of revenue across all product classes, what are your top sources of revenue, and how are you getting that done? How are you generating that revenue, making that sale?
If you had asked me that at last year's convention, I would have told you seed stock was definitely it. And seed stock is not shrinking back any, but our beef program continues to grow.
Yeah.
So as we've moved into more of the beef is probably, I would say 65, 70% of the income that we're at today.
Yeah.
So it just continues to grow and more and more. So that's the majority of what we got going on now. Seed stock, again, is steady to growing.
Yeah.
But the beef program just continues. And it's because of the avenues we open. When you get into one restaurant or you get into one commercial account, that leads to like the retail business funnels back from that because somebody tasted your product at this restaurant. Now I want to take it to the 4th of July cookout. Now I want to stock my freezer with it. So it's the trickle effect of one account leads to all these things. So it continues to grow. So that's the majority of what we've got going on now. But again, I don't want to make it sound like the seed stock is regressing, because it's certainly not. It continues to grow as well. But just the beef, in the last year, we've had some facility upgrades, getting our finishing really fine-tuned has allowed us to be prepared for growth there. And that's as we enter into our next venture in our processing facility that's going to be coming on. This is what it's allowed us. We have enough growth now that we need to be able to do some things on our own to market better, to store better, to age better, different things that we want to do a little differently. That's allowed a facility to be feasible for us to address.
Mm-hmm. That's just fantastic. And that's exciting to see that level of growth in your beef sales and to be looking at taking on a processing facility. That's huge. So, I mean, looking across, there's all these different facets of what you do. You're doing rotational grazing, you're doing genetics, you're doing feeding out cattle, you're harvesting cattle, you're selling beef. I mean, you're taking the whole spectrum, conception to consumption. When you look at 16 Peaks as an entity, all those different hats you wear within it, what are you most excited about looking forward, and what are you most concerned about looking forward?
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, I think rotational grazing or regenerative ag is my number one passion.
Yeah.
And I think that goes back to a conversation we've had. It took so much as we purchased our new location of our ranch there in Sweetwater and Philadelphia area. That was a life-changing, put all the marbles in on this, that we could have sink or swim on this deal for my dad, my mom, and my wife and I. That's a life-shattering event. And if this doesn't work, this piece of land is what we've got. So the reason regenerative ag is so important to me, when I can take organic matter from 0.5% to 4%, when I pass that down to my son, the way that we've improved the grass stand, the way we've improved the facilities, the way we've improved the soil, that's what we have in life. That piece of real estate is the legacy that I have. He may decide that he wants to do something off the farm and come back part-time. He may decide he wants nothing to do with it. Maybe my daughter that runs the place. I don't know what the future looks like, but I do know this. I want to leave the place better than I found it. So regenerative ag is, to me, I feel like that's the way that I improve. A barn could blow over and wind tomorrow. You could have a tornado come through and wipe out everything you got, but guess what? Organic matter is still there. A seed bank is still there. What we've done right there is irreversible. So that's I feel like the thing I'm most excited about. On the other side of that, I think the barriers for entry for guys like you and I that are young in agriculture just continue to get so much more difficult. And as I looked at it getting in, I didn't think of how it could be more difficult. But when you look at what the development rate in Tennessee was down Capitol Hill a few weeks ago, and I heard this statistic that alarmed me. We're losing 10 acres an hour to development in Tennessee.
Wow.
That is scary.
Yeah.
Scary. So, from a guy in production agriculture, that the price of land has already exceeded what my great-grandkids could ever get back out of it. It doesn't make sense anymore. We have to protect the land that we have. And we've had to pivot a little bit with that to leasing land, getting long-term leases, because you can't afford to purchase land that you didn't inherit. The opportunity that we had to purchase the ranch we bought was because we sold another piece of land to acquire it here. It would have never worked if we didn't do it otherwise. But leasing land is the only way we have a chance to grow our operation because of the way the real estate is in the area that we are. But it's more than just real estate. It's shrinking margins. If you're trying to just cow-calf conventionally and sell cattle at stockyards and do things like that, I'm not knocking that business. It's a viable part of the American beef supply, but the margin is so slim for a guy that's young and trying to get his feet underneath him that it's very, very difficult to get some sort of operation set up that's viable where you can sustain yourself. And I don't want to sound pessimistic there, but it is very difficult. Absolutely. And that concerns me moving down the road is if we continue to lose more acres into development, the age of the average farmer and rancher continues to grow way higher. We don't have young kids coming into this, but we also haven't provided them an opportunity to get into it really that's viable. So what do we expect them to do? That's scary to me. What's the future of agriculture look like for our kids down the road? So I feel like that's something that as an industry, we've got to try to figure out something. I don't have the answers to it, but it is a concerning thing.
Yeah, yeah. As you look back at your story, building out this program and doing what you've done and what you've been fortunate to do, putting together there, what would be any words of advice for anyone else that's backing up to 2019 and you're just going into this thing and you're putting all your marbles in and you're leaning into it and you're figuring it out and you're building a program that's now multifaceted and hopefully, going to have legs for the future, like you mentioned, for the next generation after you. So for someone else that's sitting on the front edge of that, that's looking down the barrel of like, what do I do? What do I market? How do I produce it? And you're trying to make all these decisions all at once. Any thoughts or advice or things that you would say to yourself when you were back at that point in time, or to anyone else that might be in the same situation?
Sure. So two things I would certainly, there's multifaceted answer here, but two I would key on. Yeah. You need to go to every person that will give you the time of day to ask them a million questions and get the information you can. So we did that to an extent. Probably should have done a little bit more even, but take the time to travel to these places, go to conventions, whenever you can get in front of a breeder that's successful, ask him what makes his operation go forward. Find out these little niches. So, for example, my operation probably has 70 different places that I pulled a little nugget from of, hey, this would work for me, this wouldn't. But we don't have to do it just alike. Our operations aren't alike, but both of them are successful. And for example, for me, managing two separate places, they're only 45 minutes apart, but I manage them differently because the land itself has different assets. It's not vastly different, but nonetheless, there's little intricacies of both places. So I think when you are getting started from scratch, you have one time to really establish that first model. Again, it's going to change.
Oh, yeah.
But nonetheless, learn from everybody who will give you a chance to talk to them. So take your time. Like, don't be if it takes you an extra year to meet these people, take it. It's much better off than trying to start back from scratch on something you already built and now you got to yank it back out. So that's very important. I think taking the time to do that is so vital. I really can't express that into words. But I think the second part of that is to really dive in on costs, like we've mentioned. Again, I like the term, you give it my trademark. But I don't know how, in agriculture, we have created an industry where we can't control our input cost and we can't control what we get out of the product. Name another industry like that. That's awfully scary. We also can't control the weather that produces our yield. I mean, we have no control over anything if you market things traditionally. That is scary. So I want to go back to, I might not be able to control my price of feed, but I want to know exactly how much I'm feeding, how long I need to feed it, and then dive back into, okay, if this calf consumes X amount and he gained this much weight, this is what it cost me to gain that pound. And when I gained that pound, how much of ribeye, strip, fillet, grind, all these cuts can I produce out of that? So if I don't have all of that math done to a T, I can't price my product where I know I can feed my family on this. If I sell 500 fats next year, but I didn't price it right, I'm still going to hunt a job, right? I've got to have my math to a T there. So take your time on that. If it takes you 3 test groups to figure out what that true cost is before you really launch and go to public, do it. Take the time on it, because selling it at a loss is far worse than having the opportunity to just take more time before you get to the plate itself. Take the time and do it, figure out your cost, and go from there.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's 2 things that I've keyed in on some of what you've just talked about that I'd like to, I guess, reiterate. And then I'll let you share any closing thoughts you might have or anything that maybe I've missed. A chunk of your story I've jumped over, somewhere I cut you off, something you would have liked to have shared that I didn't ask about. But 2 things that did stand out to me is you're talking about building out a profitable business model, both controlling costs and then selling at an appropriate price. I think that's so crucial. And the reason it does relates to the second point, and that's talking about passing this on to kids, right? You and I are still just young. Like, hopefully it's going to be a minute before that next generation needs to step in. But I look at it like it is our job to build a profitable business model for them. Because if we don't, what are we doing but passing on debt?
Absolutely.
Why would we say to our kids, hey, I'd like you to come back to this operation that has no control of its costs, that has no control of its end price, that has no control of its margins, that hasn't paid off anything, that has no organic material built into the soil, whatever else it may be, that's a challenge to work cattle through the facility.
Sure.
Why would we want to pass that on to our kids?
You bet.
Why would we want to enslave them? And I think that's a neat thing to make that point of, hey, you're building this to take care of your family now, but by so doing, you're providing an opportunity that would be attractive to your kid. When your son or your daughter, is an adult and they're looking at all the options out there in front of them and they say, well, you know what, this is attractive. I would like to be plugged into this business model versus saying, hey, you know what, miss me with that. I'd rather be outside of it,
Absolutely.
And I tip my hat to you for putting in that work and putting in that effort, because it's certainly easier to just build a model than it is to build a profitable one. So job well done there, and I appreciate that. But anything else that comes to mind for you, Andrew, as far as maybe points I've missed or something else you'd like to share to close out this episode?
I would just like to add on to the last closing statement of yours there. But, I think when you've had two generations that had to work off the farm and off the ranch, and you had this ultimate goal of how do I figure out how to get back full time in a place where real estate doesn't make any sense to acquire. So when I have scratched and clawed and found a way to figure that out, the driving force is certainly the legacy of okay, I don't want you to have to do that. Your mantra always for your kids is you want it better than you had it for yourself.
Sure.
And I truly believe that. But I've scratched and clawed so hard, and it's such a passion of mine. There's a fine line as a dad of how do I instill in them hard work and understand this business out, but also not force it down their throat where they don't enjoy it either.
Right.
I'm not good at that as a young dad still. So if you got any insight on that, bring it. But that's something that's a challenge. But at the same time, I want this to be, because we've worked so hard to develop it, I want it to be a legacy that they can continue to carry.
Yeah.
Again, who knows what my kids are 2 and 4.
Yeah,
and we got a long way to go here.
I got a 5, 3, and 1-year-old.
Okay, we have no idea. They got they've got a personality that's developing, sure, but what they're going to look like 15, 20 years down the road, we have no idea. Yeah. But I want it to at least be, if it's profitable and inviting and a viable opportunity to truly make a living, well, I have a chance at carrying that legacy on. I'm not going to force that on them. If it's not for them, it's not for them. We'll figure out what the future is if that's the case. They can choose whatever career path they think they need to head down. But I want it to be viable if they would like to take that opportunity on.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that's a worthy goal. You know what I mean? Sure. That's worth the hours that you're going to put in, the hours I'm going to put in, and the different routes we're going to take to do that, to build profitable models in Idaho, in Tennessee, the different things you and I will take on. I think it's worth doing to be able to pass on that opportunity, whether or not they take it, but I think it's worth doing. And I appreciate you taking the time to sit down with me, Andrew. I think there's a lot to be learned from your story, from what you've done. I appreciate you being willing to share it. And I look forward to continuing to catch up with you because, again, like you mentioned, last year you'd have had some different answers to some of the questions versus this year. So I look forward to catching up again in the future and continuing to learn together, and wish you nothing but the best for 16 Peaks in your operation, and appreciate you joining me on the Got Any Cows podcast.
Thank you, sir. Really appreciate the opportunity.
You bet, my friend. Thank you. Thanks for joining us for this episode of the Got Any Cows podcast. Be sure to subscribe, rate, and review wherever you get your podcasts, and visit us anytime at gotanycows.com.